Hello and welcome to the studio. I'm Peter Stojanovic and this is Into the Metaverse, Opportunities for Technology Leaders. Now I'm going to start with you, Eileen. Can you just give us a bit of insight into what your thoughts are on the Metaverse? So how have you translated the Metaverse and its potential for technology?
What a fantastic question. Firstly, thank you, Peter, for having me in this discussion. Hi, everyone. How am I interpreting Metaverse and what does it mean for me? I actually don't think it's anything groundbreaking, I'll be honest. I think there are lots of metaverses or businesses that are calling themselves a metaverse. And I think we need to be careful with the term the metaverse, because that implies all of these metaverses are joined together somehow and it is just one ecosystem. So from my perspective, from the outside looking in, I actually think it's where all of these technologies are brought together to have achieve better outcomes or better experiences. A lot of it's about a feeling and accessibility, making it more inclusive. But I do think that those things come at a cost. I think we would want to be a bit careful. So I'm watching it carefully from the outside, a little bit of a cynic in terms of when they say the metaverse. I don't know that we're there yet, but there are lots of metaverses that exist.
Okay, thanks, Eileen. A cautious start. Ian, what are your thoughts? And maybe particularly on the potential for different experiences between people.
Okay, so I was going to ask you what would be our definition for the metaverse today, but then I thought that wouldn't be right, so I looked up what an online definition was for the metaverse, and then to bear out Eileen's points, this isn't necessarily new, is it? It's sort of something about interactive virtual experience between people and things, and I do have a slightly skeptical views to the metaverse, because I think sometimes these things can be branded and opportunistic for an organization to scoop up all possible applications. But it has been around for some time, hasn't it? I mean, people have Oculus Rift, and surgeons have been working with virtual reality or different views of things, and we've talked in the past about digital twins and ways people can interact digitally. As to what it means for people, I think at the moment we might be thinking about the metaverse in terms of avatars and how we interact with each other. And I did sound out some peer CIOs last night on this topic, knowing I was going to be having this discussion today. And people said that where they'd had some experiences in the metaverse in meetings like this, it hadn't necessarily at this stage been very favorable, because people are even more abstracted from the personal interaction than we would be looking at a screen. It's not to say it won't evolve and it's all a matter of time before finding the great use cases. I think pretty much everyone I asked said they'd had some interaction or some experience, but that was more like an experiment that hadn't been repeated. So perhaps it's early days to see what the metaverse will bring.
Interesting, and also it comes into question some of the definitions that the metaverse provides, given this context. Juan, at Imperial though, is this metaverse something that either your students are talking about, or maybe some of the researchers are considering? What are the conversations you're hearing?
Yeah, so it's very much there as part of the conversation we're having on a day-to-day basis. It's being kicked into very much the front page for us through, especially last year when Mark Zuckerberg renamed Facebook Meta, and that brought it into us, created a whole bunch of interest. But I think we're still inventing it, we're still experimenting. It isn't something that you can probably define very, very clearly. We're learning how to what the opportunities are, how we can leverage those opportunities. In a simple form, we can see how we could have a university in the metaverse and deliver lots of teaching and research through the metaverse or a metaverse. But for that to be useful, we need the metaverses to be able to interact and talk to each other. We need to have some form of digital currency. So it's really difficult to see where it's going to go into the future. I think now it's really evolving from a lot of gaming and the gaming platform. So we have all kinds of immersive games where you go online. There's platforms like Roblox that went public last year, and they're absolutely amazing ways to develop all these immersive experiences. But in terms of business, it's really difficult at the moment to see where the value is. There's obviously organizations out there that are experimenting. Nike has created a whole bunch of virtual goods and things.
Nike always seem to sort of just get the cusp of things and
so
and roll
early
with
adopters
it.
and so we don't think we'll be an early adopter in that space. We when the pandemic started, we looked at Altspace VR, where and we thought, can we create a virtual experience and an engaging experience for our students through some virtual world, and we did a little bit of a proof of concept, but it was not really as engaging as we thought it would be.
Early days.
Very, very early days. So I don't think we'll be an early adopter in that.
And your earlier point about connecting different metaverses calls what Eileen said about being careful about calling it the metaverse, because we're not there yet.
Yes, we're not there.
It's still isolated pockets, for want of a better word. Freddie, Juan said it's probably quite early days yet in the business context to think about the potential for the metaverse and experiences. Have you seen any insights to the contrary? Any clear front horses?
I do share, the sentiment that's been put out there already, because, by the way, this is not the first time that we've heard yet of another buzzword that is going around, right? And if you look at throughout our career, there's a lot of technology that's come and gone before us. There has been a lot of false dawns, right? But on the other hand, we've also been surprised by many things that has just happened. For example, I remember when I was, building the next generation platform for my company for the internet. And then the next day, just before launch, the tablet came along. And they asked me, what is this? And I said, I have no idea, right? And then suddenly, that tablet thing became the mobile thing. And so I think if you look throughout the history of technological advancements, even Bill Gates, when he had the vision of saying we're going to build a mobile phone where you can do personal computing on a phone, he had the vision, but he did not make that happen. Right? So I think part of the answers is not going to necessarily come from any one of us, because right now it's not a thing, right? A thing becomes a thing when everybody knows about it. Right now, it's not really a thing, and therefore, it's just all of us speculating, having different views on things, right? But that time will come whereby, because of the way, again, the technology industry has evolved, that critical mass would happen, and that critical mass would then evolve an outcome and a result and the thing that we will all be surprised by. So, yes, I share the cynicism, but I also share the excitement that this potentially may be something new, especially when Meta has invested how much? 180 billion? Or planning to. So we cannot discount that level of investment.
I mean, they even changed their name, Freddie, so it tells you everything.
Would that thing be a good thing or a bad thing?
Yes, exactly.
No surprises.
Exactly. But you've also raised some really interesting points. And Freddie, when you talk about those products or shifts that did change the nature of things, it was all because of the experience. So, in that context, maybe experience is the connecting thread between all of those unpredictable changes that we've all gone through. Now, Leon, Elsewhen's all about the experience. So when you think of the metaverse and its potential on the experience, do you think this is all speculative still? Or have you seen potentials that certain businesses have already capitalized on?
I think it's interesting from a business perspective because it's certainly an emergent trend. And I agree with everybody here that this is something that is, still taking shape. But there's kind of key themes that start to emerge around that. And I think they're very interesting. And I think that the reason that there's so much kind of uptake and hype and kind of, Facebook is almost forcing us into that world is because we are looking for the next paradigm. Like you said, we had the internet, the mobile revolution. We never knew what that's going to cause and where it was going. And we see that there are changes in technology that are potentially becoming the next paradigm shift. So we're, as a society, we learn to kind of, notice these things. So we're trying to understand where is that going. So particular specific, huge, successfully, and meaningful changes that this brought to businesses. There are areas that you can see that happening. There's companies that are setting up themselves around capturing value. There's kind of, I would say that Metaverse is much bigger than just virtual environments where, there's kind of Web3 themes, there's kind of ownership. Juan mentioned there's a few key themes around here, and I think businesses are looking at how they can capture that.
And if therefore it is still early days, everyone, and perhaps the speculation is rife with what the next 10 years looks like, is there anything happening now that we could draw lessons upon? Maybe, I think, Juan, you talked about gaming. Some of the metaverse implications around gaming has been transformative, and around maybe the VR aspects around education, of course. But has anyone across this roundtable seen anything that have particularly sparked their interest and curiosity in regards to the experience that you yourself found, and how you could use that to benefit your customer or clients or employee base?
I'm happy to jump in here, from being a long time in publishing and now in education, right? The two things that struck me was that, it's about the content, right? It's also about the language. So if you talk about trying to create an inclusive world, right? Those two things are still getting in the way, because if it's only in English language, either the content or the language, then it stops. But if the potential of this technology is that, for example, one of the things I've come across is that, it's trying to develop this capability that allows you to get instantaneous language translation. That in itself is amazing, right? So almost real time, maybe the day will come where it's real time. We're having this conversation in English, but somebody else that is joining us will be listening to that in their own language in the way that they can relate to. So that, for me, is one really good possibility that I'd like to see happen.
I think the gaming piece is really important. So I think that there is a lot of I'm a gamer, and a typical gamer is a mid-30s woman, actually. That's kind of a profile of a typical gamer. Yeah, because if you look at mobile gaming as well, it's this sort of wave of cultural trend has not entered the workforce as much as others did.
True.
And there's a generation that is growing on coming from these environments and feeling very comfortable with them. So how will this affect our workforce and how we do work and how we communicate as a business and how we do business? I think what you said about communication is very interesting, because again, in gaming has been transcending cultures. People have friends across the globe that they actually never spoke to before beyond gaming, and there's sometimes friends over years and years and years. So how this new medium of communicating is going to come into other aspects of life, I think is an interesting shift.
And I suppose one of the other benefits of talking about such a nascent trend is that we can deliberate on the ethics before it actually enters into society proper, which is quite a rare thing to do at the moment. We normally think about ethics after the fact. So with everything we've thought about, what then should we focus on when considering the ethical implications of something as all-consuming as the metaverse?
So about policing, let's just think a little bit about where we seem to be generally headed towards metaverse and social interactions. We talked a bit about gaming, because we've had metaverse type situations before where we could model things and use digital models for various things. So if we're going towards like the social side of things, it's going to draw out presumably the best and the worst of human nature, isn't it? Like any other platforms. So it's going to be the same question as what do we do about trolls or people that can have extreme interactions because perhaps they feel it's a less interpersonal experience. People can say or do whatever they want without thinking of the implications of the feelings on other people. But maybe there are other extreme examples. I'm not just trying to be a skeptic. Other extreme examples where it could induce extreme empathy, but I'm not sure what those scenarios are. I don't know how it would be policed, because it's going to amplify the same difficulties that we're seeing at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, and these are good discussion points. I wonder then, how do you as tech leaders bring about these conversations in senior leadership teams discussions or strategy discussions if the metaverse does have the promise that it promises, whether it's on policing, whether it's on its application for education, etc. How do you recommend initiating these types of discussions with your peers in the business?